Bloomberg Television.
Could the deadly bird flu be airborne? That's the question scientists are asking as the current wave of the virus spreads from Minnesota to Wisconsin and beyond. Farmers say that would be catastrophic for the nation's poultry and egg industries. Here to talk about the implications is Cheryl Davison. She is the director of the Laboratory for Avian Medicine and Pathology at UPenn's Vet School. Cheryl, thanks for joining us this morning. This is not the first outbreak of bird flu in the U.S., and it won't be the last. What is the distinction of this current wave?
We have had outbreaks of avian influenza, and thank you very much for having me on the program. We have had outbreaks of influenza in the United States, and the most notable one that we had was back in Pennsylvania in '83-'84, where we lost 17 million birds with a cost of $60 million. And since that time, we've had smaller outbreaks, but this particular outbreak has affected many states and many types of birds across the United States. So it is an unprecedented outbreak in the United States of bird flu. 8
million birds have died in this wave. That's an incredible, to me, that's an incredible number. I mean, how many birds are there?
Well, it is an incredible number, but if we look at the poultry industry in general, we raise 9 billion broiler birds. So those are the meat-type chickens that we raise. We raise over 200,000 turkeys, and we also raise a large amount of the layer birds too. In Pennsylvania alone, we have 24 million layers in Pennsylvania. So this is a very, very large industry in the United States.
And the risk to humans, according to the CDC, is that it is low, but infection is possible, which raises more questions than really it answers. Previous strains we know in other countries in the past have been spread to humans and people have died. What confidence do you have this time around that human infection and transmission will remain low or non-existent?
Well, this particular virus has been out in other parts of the world, and it hasn't caused human infection. So we always watch that, and CDC and the USDA always watch those viruses because these viruses can mutate. And so we always want to watch that carefully. Right now, the risk is very, very low, and we're watching that. But historically, this virus throughout the world really hasn't caused any human infection.
So what's the prescription for farmers? I mean, is there a set of regulations farmers can follow to stop the spread or reduce the risk of the spread of infection?
Yeah, the important thing is biosecurity, and I'm sure you've heard that comment. What is biosecurity? It really is reducing the risk of that coming onto your farm. So when we go on farms, for example, when I go onto a farm, my vehicle is cleaned inside, outside, clean clothes, take a shower. When I get to the facility, we put on boots, hats, coveralls, we step through disinfectant baths. But beyond that, we have to look at what all is coming onto the farm. Various trucks come onto the farm. Various people come onto the farm. They all have to come on in a biosecure manner. And we have to, if they're non-essential people coming on the farm, they shouldn't be on that farm. So every time something comes into that farm, that's a potential introduction. But in the big scheme, what we need to do with control, we have to euthanize the birds that are affected. And then we have to clean and disinfect that farm. And then that farm has to sit with no birds in it for a very long time period so we can get this outbreak under control.
Cheryl, do we know for a fact how this strain of bird flu is being spread right now?
Well, if we start back how it came into the country, we believe wild birds carried that. And many times the ducks and the geese, they'll carry it, but they won't have any disease, so they'll be perfectly fine. But it's their droppings that will have the virus in there, and then it can spread. And then, again, biosecurity. It's important that we make sure that it doesn't get spread from farm to farm, people dragging it into poultry houses. And that's the key here, is really looking at the biosecurity and making sure we really put that barrier so people don't get onto the farm, and we stop that spread.
You mentioned the last big epidemic, which was in 1983-84 in Pennsylvania. It has not reached the Atlantic flyway this time around. Does a windy spring change all of that?
Well, the question about wind has come up before, and the wind will not carry this virus miles. It could carry it on a farm locally, and it actually could carry it potentially on a farm that was close by. And we had an experience in one of the outbreaks, not the 83-84 outbreak, but we had an experience in another outbreak where it was a very windy spring. And we had an affected farm, and then the next farm downwind got it. And we knew by mapping the prevailing winds that another farm would get it. And the producer actually put plastic all along the side of his house to stop the spread, and it did. But I have to put a caveat in there. We actually, at that point in time, were euthanizing the birds outside of the house. So the wind was carrying the feathers and dander and everything downwind, and we don't do that anymore. So it's important when we do euthanize these birds that they stay within the house for us to depopulate and euthanize in that particular house and not outside.
All right, some lessons learned from what we saw in 1983 to 84. Thank you so much. Cheryl Davison, she is Director of the Laboratory of Avian Medicine and Pathology at Penn Vet.